Hello, my name is Betty Hernandez, and this video presentation is a culmination of research performed for FIU's Masters in Public Health course entitled Introduction into Environmental Health, course given by Professor Jai Parkash. My research topic is titled Haiti and the Driving Force Behind the Dire Situation the Country is in Now. In order for us to understand the situation that Haiti is in now, we have to go way back to Haiti's beginning. And interestingly enough, in 1492, Hispaniola was the first island that Christopher Columbus landed on. After a period of piracy, the island was split into two, with the eastern portion being taken over by Spain, which is now known as Santo Domingo, and the western portion by France, which is now known as Haiti. The French plantation owners were brutal and literally worked their African slaves to death. In the late 1700s, the slaves revolted, and by 1804, Haiti was the first freed slave nation in the Western Hemisphere. The United States and France, being slave owners, determined that having a freed slave nation was a threat to their stability and band together to boycott any exported products from Haiti. The boycott placed upon them by the Western Hemisphere and the debt that was imposed upon them by France as a result of the revolution left Haiti impoverished and in debt until the mid-1930s. On top of that, internally, the government was controlled by the elitist few and did not allow for the Creole population to grow. As a result, the first ruler of Haiti, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, declared himself Emperor of Haiti in the French style. This was devastating to Haiti's economy, which did not allow basically the nation to progress and to develop its own culture, infrastructure systems, and stability for its own nation. The new government that was formed in Haiti was run by the elite group of Haitians that were French speakers, the vast minority of the population. The majority of the population was mostly the illiterate freed slaves that spoke only Creole, which was a dialect of French and a combination of African dialects. The so-called French Haitians were a minority of mulattoes, which were children of the plantation owners and slaves, and a small number of freed slaves, which turned their back on their own culture and imitated the French in culture and language. The official language of Haiti was made to be French, which minimized any ability for the Creole population to progress. It allowed the elitist group to maintain control of the government and the economy with very little growth for the Creole-speaking population. Under a free government, the plantation lands were taken over and they were distributed free to the military or at low cost for individual owners. The farms, as generations progressed, were subdivided among the descendants until the point where the farms were so small as to not be sustainable. At that point, the farmers, desperate for food for their families, started to denude the hills of trees in order to form charcoal for cooking and heating, and this caused mudslides and contamination of the water supply system around the country. Political strife in Haiti continued even during the 20th century. Particularly notorious was the Duvalier family regime led by Papa Doc and Baby Doc. Their disruption and control of the country through terror, they dismantled the Haitian military and formation of the paramilitary group, the Tonton Macoute, which killed and tortured thousands of Haitians, with many more disappearing. This caused a migration of Haitians out of the country, but since the United States did not recognize the Duvalier family as a legitimate regime, unfortunately sent the Haitians back to the country to deal with the issues there. The Tonton Macoute and the Duvalier regime particularly focused on the other educated French Haitians because they were considered a threat to the government control. So there was what is called basically a brain drain of the island, because either they ran and left the country or they were killed by the Tonton Macoute, leaving an impoverished, illiterate country under the control of a despotic regime. Economically, what has resulted is the north part of Haiti, which was mostly farms, have basically denuded the trees, and this topsoil has been eroded to a point where farming is unsustainable. To the south, the people have migrated to Port-au-Prince, being the capital and the center for factories and work other than farming. The earthquake of January 2010 was particularly devastating since it was centered around the capital of Port-au-Prince. Because of the lack of reinforcement in the concrete walls of the capital, vast majority of the buildings collapsed, including the government structures and hospitals and factories that were located around in the area. The loss of jobs, the loss of farms, the contamination of water after the earthquake devastated the area, created a massive explosion of shantytowns around the capital for people desperate to get materials and food and supplies for sustaining their families. Hurricane Tomas in November of 2010 further aggravated the situation by being a direct hit on the island, this causing massive mudslides and contamination of the water supply for the country. The people continued to use whatever little water supply they could find for cooking and for disposing of human waste, further causing the spread of dysentery and cholera across the nation. The effects of Hurricane Irene in 2011 further hampered the recovery efforts that were being performed on the island. A branch of the United Nations, entitled UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, had been on the island since 2008, working with the government in initiating some mid to long-term recovery plans for the island. The group was on the island at the time of the earthquake and was able to assist rescuers that came to the island with recovery plans that they had initiated. As of 2010, UNEP had already established a set of programs that were to be done by the locals for the locals in improving living conditions, small projects for work among the people, restoring natural resources, and creating infrastructure projects for water and sanitary sewer systems in order to decrease health issues as well as increase work upon the population. UNEP, among other organizations, are working with the government also to provide opportunities for companies to come and have create manufacturing jobs upon the island, giving an opportunity for increased paid jobs. In conclusion, the reason that Haiti is in the dire situation that it is now is very complex. It is a combination of politics, economics, and greed that has brought so much misery to this small island nation. This concludes my video presentation. I thank you for your time. Have a good day.